If you even cared, you'd actually be here.
Looks like we finally figured out how Tom Holland's MJ, aka Zendaya, fits into this new relationship dynamic in Earth 616, especially with Spider-Woman joining the MCU. And there's a lot more to unpack, so let's dive into everything we know so far about her introduction. But before we dive into Zendaya's version of Spider-Woman in the upcoming Spider-Man Brand New Day movie, it's actually pretty cool to take a look at the long and twisty road the Spider-Woman character has taken in Marvel Comics. Because believe it or not, she's not just one person, a whole bunch of different characters have taken up the Spider-Woman mantle over the years. We're talking about Jessica Drew, Julia Carpenter, Mattie Franklin, and even some alternate universe versions like Gwen Stacy and Ashley Barton. It's a wild web. Now, when Spider-Woman first showed up, it wasn't some long-planned origin story or anything deep like that. It was actually more of a business move. Back in 1977, Marvel's publisher at the time, Stan Lee, realized that if they didn't create a character called Spider-Woman fast, some other company might beat them to it and snatch up the name. So basically, they rushed to put something together just to claim the copyright. It might sound a little unglamorous, but that's honestly how a lot of comic book characters got started. Stan was especially cautious because something similar had happened before. Marvel had introduced Wonder Man, and then DC got upset because they already had Wonder Woman. So Marvel dropped Wonder Man to avoid legal drama. But then, DC turned around and created Power Girl right after Marvel introduced Power Man, which Stan thought was super unfair. So this time, they wanted to play it smart and protect their own idea. That's how Jessica Drew came to be the original Spider-Woman. She got her own series, which ran for 50 issues from 1978 to 1983. And although she stepped out of the spotlight for a while in the 80s, she wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Jessica came back in a bunch of future volumes, including one in 2009 and another in 2014, where she took on more of a street-level vibe. In one version from 2015, she was even pregnant and solving crimes as a private investigator, which added a fresh angle to her story. By the time the 100th issue of Spider-Woman dropped in 2020, Marvel marked the milestone with a special oversized edition, so clearly she's been through a lot. But Jessica Drew's not the only one who's worn the suit. Julia Carpenter was the second Spider-Woman. She used to be with the Avengers and also went by other names like Arachne and Madam Web. Her look was actually pretty different too. She wore a black and white costume that fans still remember. Then there's Mattie Franklin, who had a brief moment of impersonating Spider-Man before she became her own version of Spider-Woman. She got her own short comic run and later popped up in other titles like Alias and Loners. Charlotte Witter, though, flipped the script completely. Instead of being a hero, she was a villain who used the Spider-Woman identity to cause chaos. And Veranke, now she's interesting, was a Skrull queen who pretended to be Jessica Drew for quite a long time. She was even part of the new Avengers while undercover, which made for some pretty dramatic storylines during Marvel's Secret Invasion arc. Then we've got the alternate universe versions, which is where things get even crazier. In the Ultimate Marvel Universe, Spider-Woman is actually a clone of Peter Parker, but with the twist that the clone is female. So it's Peter's mind waking up in a girl's body and trying to make sense of it all. That version had some intense identity questions to work through. And of course, we can't forget Gwen Stacy. In her universe, she's the one who gets bit by the radioactive spider instead of Peter. She becomes Spider-Woman, although fans mostly know her as Spider-Gwen. She's become so popular that she's now starring in animated films like Into the Spider-Verse and its sequels, and people absolutely love her. Now, we don't know exactly which version of Spider-Woman Zendaya will be playing in Spider-Man Brand New Day, but the big theory going around is that she'll be portraying a variant of Spider-Woman who ends up in the Earth 616 universe. That's the main timeline in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and bringing her into that setting could shake things up in a pretty major way, especially between her and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Because if you remember how things ended in Spider-Man No Way Home, it was kind of heartbreaking. Peter had to let go of MJ to keep her safe, and the whole world forgot who he was. So this new twist might give fans a little bit of closure or even hope for a different kind of future for those two characters. It's interesting because Zendaya playing a Spider-Woman variant could totally reframe her entire connection with Peter Parker. Instead of being just MJ, she'd now have powers of her own mission, and maybe even a completely different origin story. And that opens up a bunch of possibilities. What if Peter meets this new version of her and realizes she looks exactly like MJ, but she's not his MJ? That would hit hard emotionally, but it also keeps the story fresh. It's a clever way to keep Zendaya involved while still respecting the emotional ending of No Way Home. There's also the chance that Zendaya could be playing a version inspired by Jessica Drew, the original Spider-Woman, especially since Jessica is the most established one in the comics. But it could just as easily be someone like Julia Carpenter, who had a lot of interaction with other heroes and spent time as both Spider-Woman and Madam Web. Or even Gwen Stacy's Earth 65 version, if Marvel wants to really lean into the multiverse chaos. But honestly, Zendaya's character might be an entirely new creation inspired by those older versions, kind of like how Miles Morales was a fresh take on the Spider-Man story when he first appeared. Either way, it's exciting because Zendaya has already proven she can carry emotional scenes and bring serious presence to the screen. Giving her superpowers and dropping her into the main action, that just raises the stakes. And because Spider-Woman isn't tied down to just one identity in the comics, Marvel has the flexibility to build a version that fits perfectly into where they want the MCU to go next. What's also interesting is how this new Spider-Woman angle could affect the dynamic between Peter and whoever Zendaya ends up playing. It won't be the classic romantic setup they had in the previous films. Instead, it might be something more layered, where Peter is haunted by the memory of MJ and now has to work with someone who looks exactly like her but isn't her. So although Spider-Woman started off as a rushed idea to lock down a name, the character has grown into something way bigger. She's been a hero, a villain, a mom, a clone, and even royalty, if you count Veranke. That's why it's going to be really exciting to see what Zendaya does with the role, because with this kind of history, there's no telling which parts of it she'll pull from or what brand new spin Marvel might put on it this time around. Well, that's it. For now, make sure that you like our video. Please share your views and opinions in the comments section with us.